And welcome, friends, to the Wednesday morning edition of the Grace Hour. We are broadcasting live here from our studios, which are located at the home of the Greater Grace World Outreach. And we want to welcome you to today's Wednesday broadcast of the Grace Hour. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you'll stay with us for the next 45 minutes or so. My name is Pastor John Love. Joining me in the studio today is Pastor Barry Quirk as we continue to develop our theme about love and security. And, of course, today we'll focus a little bit more specifically on love in marriage. And that's why I'm so grateful that Pastor Barry Quirk is with us today, because he has a lot of experience with love in his marriage. And I would imagine if you added up all of the years that we have been married together, it's quite a few years. And I guess we have some experience, not nearly as much as others. I know my in-laws were married for 74 years.
Wow.
Yeah, John and Ethel Murphy, 74 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah, my mom and dad, before my mom passed away, I think that they had hit over 60 years. So, it's kind of, that's healthy. And on my end of things, to come from two families whose marriages stayed the course and fought through all of its challenges and difficulties and roadblocks and mistakes and failures, I'm sure. But they didn't quit. Wow. And there's something to be said about that, isn't there?
Absolutely. First of all, your last name's Love. So if we're going to talk about love,
yeah,
I think you're an expert.
Far from it. Far from it.
The reason that we're experts on this topic is that, he who's failed much has loved much. And we learn a lot in our failures, actually. And it is, no pressure, 74 years and 60-something years, and it's all in the family line, right? Marriage is a really awesome thing if it's done in the right way. And it's, people call it a ball and chain. But really, when love's involved, there's an old country song my wife and I like, and by Paul Overstreet, and it says, "Love don't feel like a ball and chain to me." And that's because it can be a huge blessing if you understand what it really is, and there's not false expectations and, all kinds of concepts that we can't keep. We have this in America especially, and I don't know about other parts of the globe, but there is this notion that marriage is, Central Park on a horse-drawn wagon and, flower petals and music. And those things are nice and can be a part of marriage. But if that's what your expectation for marriage is, you probably are setting yourself up for disaster.
Yeah, I mean, the horse and buggy in Central Park, my wife and I, we did that once. I think we get into an argument. So it doesn't always translate into this epitome of love.
Right.
But yeah, you make a good point. I mean, let's be honest about it. When it comes to marriage, that is one great challenge. Young people so often, and I know because, I think this coming weekend, my grandson will go to the altar and he's going to have a wedding day. And we're grateful for him and the young woman that he's marrying. But it's almost like before they get there, you want to give them a pretty good, healthy dose of reality.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, somebody said prior to marriage, during the dating season, it's just, you've got the butterflies and there's the infatuation and it's just these wonderful highs. And then somebody has described it this way, that after a few years of marriage, it's like driving through the Midwest, it's the plain road that goes on forever.
Man, you're getting in trouble right now.
No, I know. And sometimes I do get in trouble because people are like, well, why don't you have a more romantic perspective of marriage? Because the romantic perspective of marriage seems to be separated from the reality of marriage.
Yeah.
It's going to be challenging. Why in the world would you gather together all of those witnesses when you make those vows, people who say, I'm listening to you make those vows, and I'm going to make sure that you keep those vows. You know, not just God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, but your families, your friends, your relatives, everybody. Everybody's gathered together to hear you make those vows, and they should stand behind you to say, keep them.
Well, that's
no matter what happens.
Very good point. And, you know, we do hold each other accountable. You know, in the beginning, it's love is blind, right? What does that mean? It means that we fall in love with that cute little smile or that silly little giggle, the things, the mannerisms, all those things that are so special, the same things that drive you crazy after you've been married for a few years. And, you know, I mean, I'm saying from my side especially that, you know, what I present as my best to get this person to fall in love with me might not always be there for the entire time. But I do like the fact that in our marriages, as we mature, the things that are important to us are no longer performance or saying something like, you know, that is appeasing to the ear, but there's no substance behind it. And not that we enter into our relationships manipulating somebody, but it is really true. I mean, when you're married, it's a whole nother ballgame. You know, there's nothing hidden. Everything's, you know, you're together. Your laundry on the floor is your laundry on the floor. And there's just a lot of things that we can draw from our walk with God that is the same way as in marriage, you know. And I think it would be one thing if God said, I'm going to fool man into falling in love with woman, which he really does. You know, men are from one planet and women are from another planet. And the things that make us happy and, you know, are not always the same things that make our spouses happy. And we have to learn about that. And we have to learn about, you know, dying to ourselves. We have to learn about esteeming one another higher than ourselves. And those things that when we take them on in a challenge, we grow in them. And we start to see it's pretty rewarding. It's pretty rewarding. And, you know, love, the big thing between love and lust, you know, we talk about this with our students. Lust is something that is consumed upon myself. It's for my benefit solely. And many people enter into a marriage thinking that I'm going to get something out of this marriage. You know, I'm going to get somebody who's going to serve me. I'm going to get somebody who's going to take care of me. I'm going to get somebody who's going to put up with me. That's personal, and it's really not the definition of love. You know, we know love in 1 Corinthians 13 is something completely different. It suffers long. It's kind. It envies not. It doesn't vaunt itself up. It's not proud. It doesn't speak about its own. It's not easily provoked. Those are things that are not, you know, for my own benefit. Those are things that are for the benefit of the person that the love is intended toward. And think about God's grace towards us. You know, he doesn't get any benefit out of saving a sinner except that he has fellowship with that sinner once the relationship with Christ has happened. So there really is a parallel that we can draw from God's gift.
Oh, yeah, no question. And I'm glad you brought up 1 Corinthians chapter 13. You will probably hear those passages quoted during a marriage ceremony more than any other biblical passages, right? I mean, people want it read. I mean, we're even talking about like unbelievers.
Yes,
will quote it because it's beautiful. You know, it's the inspired word of God. But someone, I remember reading this a long time ago, someone said, well, what we need to do as we read 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is to substitute the word love and put the word Jesus in there, okay? And so if we did that, and would we be so far off base if we did such a thing? No, not when the Bible clearly teaches that God is love.
Right.
All right, so let's replace the word love or charity with Jesus. So 1 Corinthians 13:4, Jesus suffers long. Jesus is kind. Jesus does not envy. Jesus does not parade himself around, is not puffed up. Now, we would read it and say, well, I don't always suffer long. I'm not always kind. Sometimes I do have envy in my heart. Sometimes I do want to talk more about myself than my spouse.
Yeah.
Goes on. Jesus does not behave rudely, does not seek his own. He's not easily provoked. He thinks no evil. He doesn't rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Jesus bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. Jesus endures all things. And then in verse 8, it concludes by saying, Jesus never fails.
Wow.
So what I have done from time to time conducting a wedding ceremony is told the couples, listen, don't spend a lifetime trying to reproduce a love that you cannot replicate. Spend a lifetime receiving a love you can't resist.
Wow.
God's love.
Yeah.
If we know that God loves us this way, immediately there is a newfound capacity within our souls to begin to love each other.
Wow.
I mean, we know this. The biblical principle can never be lost on this. God's never going to ask us to do anything for others that he hasn't first done for us.
Yes.
It all begins there. But it gives us this great capacity to live in love and to share that love. And again, I just think marriage is just the greatest challenge in the world to deal with your self-life. As you said a moment ago, you know, somebody said that, you know, a marriage is like looking in, when you look at your partner, it's like looking into a full-length mirror. And whatever you don't like, you see in yourself.
Wow. Absolutely. And I mean, Romans 12:10 says to us to be kindly affectionate one towards another, right? That preferring one another greater than ourselves is impossible unless we're seeing each other through the eyes of the cross.
Yes.
Because everything that I want in my life, you know, if it's for personal gain, I'm going to be disappointed. You know, I have expectations in my mind, and I fall into this a lot. I have an expectation of how things are going to go in a certain situation, and I don't give definition on what the situation and what I'm hoping for. So I've already handicapped the situation against my spouse. My wife says, you know, what's the matter? And I said, well, this didn't happen. And she said, well, I didn't know you wanted that to happen. In my mind, it's like, well, you should just understand me. But I don't even understand me. So how can I expect my wife to understand me? And so this preferring one another really does have profound benefit. That's the whole irony of this, is that lust, we're always trying to consume things for our own benefit, and many times fall short and are empty-hearted or live in shame or guilt. And in love, when we initiate without expectation, except that it's what God has asked us to do as he has loved himself, then we find that there's an amazing fruit from that, without our motive being the fruit, but our motive being the love, and we receive something really awesome. And I think that's the picture of our lives with God, is that we don't have anything to offer except our obedience and our availability to what he's done for us. And as a result, the fruit is very profound, and it's very enjoyable, and it has something pure in it. You know, it's not that, you know, I got the response that I could only have hoped for, but because I initiated in God's love with God's mind, and he did something amazing in that union, in that fellowship, and the unity that happens as a result of it.
There is a huge amount of maintenance required in the marriage relationship, isn't there? And again, I look at it like my wife often says, you know, what happens to the house if you neglect it?
Yeah.
What happens to the yard if you neglect it? And you know, I've got this one big, well, it's not a big tree, it's more like a big bush out in the right side of my front yard. And you know, if I just let that go, it's going to turn into a jungle of its own. So I'm always trimming it. I'm always taking care of it.
Yeah.
Because I know without that kind of maintenance, like anything in the house, if things begin to fall apart, you have to address them.
Yes.
And what's true of a home, and what's true of a building, and what's true of a garden or a yard is equally true of a relationship, and in particular of a marriage. It doesn't kind of operate. You can't put it on remote control or
That's right.
cruise control. That's the word I'm looking for. It's got to be addressed all the time.
Absolutely.
In the same way that you might put your automobile on cruise control, but you can't go to sleep. You got to stay alert. You got to stay awake. That might help you in a long trip, but at the same time, you've got to stay alert. Well, the same thing could be said about a marriage. You just got to. Maintenance is essential, and the maintenance involves communication. It involves fellowship. It involves forgiveness. You know, I love Billy Graham's definition of a good marriage, just two great forgivers that have been brought together in a union.
Yeah, and that's really why his wife, when interviewed and asked, have you ever thought about divorcing your husband? And she said, divorce? No, never. Murder? Sometimes. Because, there are days when it's just like, what is going on here? All of those things that you just said are very profound. Actually, it's funny you said that because I was thinking we have this gutter that goes over the top of, it's a rain spout, but it's a gutter, and it goes over the top of our carport. And somehow the little helicopters land in there from the oak tree in the bad weather. And because the downspout gets a little clogged up, there gets some silt in there. And, I always look at it and go, okay, I got to deal with that at some point. Got to deal with that at some point. And the other day I'm driving up my driveway and there's little oak trees growing in my downspout. And it's like, well, this is what happens if you don't tend to it regularly, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually things that we could say, oh, I recognize that maybe there's something that needs attention in my marriage. I'll get to it. But you don't maintain it. It's like letting your tires on the highway get bald to the point where you have a blowout, and then it's too late to deal with it.
Exactly.
And the beautiful thing is that, as you said earlier, there's nothing that God asks us to do in our marriage to maintain on our own, right? It's just operating in the directives that he's given us, in the capacity to love one another is the way that he's demonstrated. As he says in Philippians, love your wife like I love the church. It's not do something that I couldn't do for you. It's do something that I've already demonstrated for you. And you'll see the life that comes out of it. And so there really is a beautiful coming unto Jesus and then having him help you in your relationship on a daily basis. And it does prevent us from having things. I love this thought of keeping short accounts, like a stupid argument. And we've heard Pastor Stevens or Pastor Showers talked about in many occasions the couple with the pickle jar, that the pickle jar gets broken and then the couple have this fallout from this pickle jar and it turns into this years-long silence between the two of them. And the next thing you know, their lives are growing completely apart over a pickle jar.
That's right.
And, so we say, I broke the pickle jar. I'm sorry. Can I get you a new one? And our spouse says, oh, no, I just wanted you to understand this was something that was important to me, or whatever it is, that we have a relationship that keeps those accounts very short. We have to do that with God. We wake up in the morning and it's okay to say, it's actually important to say, Lord, I am wrong. I'm wrong. I can be wrong. And when God says, thank you, I've made it right, that's a good life, But if we walk around in pride or in hubris saying, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. In the meantime, things are falling apart and we're getting hurt, right? And pride comes before a big fall.
Yeah. And I just want to state for the record, I think I should know this number, but I think my wife and I, we've been married, let me see now, let me do the math, and I think it's 45, going on 46 years.
Yeah.
And for the record, stated for the record, it has not been a perfect marriage.
What, is there a perfect marriage?
I don't think there is.
No.
Even those who claim that they have one are probably hiding something. So it hasn't been perfect. It's had its ups and downs, its great challenges, its highs, its lows. And then you get two sinners living together, and then you reproduce more sinners.
Yeah.
And then it's like now you have a family of sinners. But I think it was, who was it? Pastor John Palmer, years ago, he's since gone home to be with the Lord, was a part of our ministry for years. His definition of a family, he says, just a bunch of sinners huddled around the cross.
Beautiful.
In brokenness.
Beautiful.
I mean, that's the good description of a family. That's a good description of a marriage.
Yeah.
My wife and I have learned to just keep going to the well of grace. And that will keep a marriage going.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was studying Amos 3:3 a little bit because the picture there is how can two walk together unless they be agreed? And so you could almost come on one side or the other side of that agreement and say, well, we should be agreed, but it should be in my opinion, or we should be agreed and it should be in your opinion. And actually, we're not really agreeing. We're deferring to one another. Or we're compromising, not in the right way. Okay, we'll let you do what you want this time, but next time we're doing what I want. And actually, you're scorekeeping in your relationship, and you haven't really gained anything. But I like what that verse says, and actually, I was looking at it in the Greek a little bit. In the Hebrew in Old Testament, and it says, really, can two walk together without an appointment to meet? That's actually what it's like. Agreement means an appointment to meet. And I like that because when you go to the appointment to meet and you arrive at that appointment, it's got to be God's viewpoint that you settle on, because our own viewpoint is just going to keep us in that cycle of what benefits me, what benefits you, what do you like? We have this, age-long joke in our family that my wife says, hey, you want to go out to eat tonight? Yeah, sure. Well, what do you want? And I've been asked that question so many times, and I, as you can tell, am not very picky of an eater. So I will say to her very quickly, let's get Chinese food or pizza, because I know that those are the two things that she doesn't want to eat. And then she'll say what she would like to eat, and I'll go, wow, wasn't that simple? We got it out now. But the point is, she's trying to just say, what would you like to do? And she's trying to benefit me. And I'm trying to say, I'm not picky, so let's just do what benefits you. But actually, I have to learn, and I'm still learning, and I've been married 31 years, imagine that, that there's a relation, like the question is just the opportunity to have the relationship, and that's the thing I like, that, in those years of marriage that you talked about that haven't been perfect, there's been a lot of really perfect, there's been a lot of things, I'm sure, that even coming out of keeping short accounts, coming out of an argument, I could be perturbed about something, and halfway through the day, I don't even know what I'm perturbed about anymore. I just know that I got to be perturbed. And actually, at the end of the day, when I have realized I've lost a whole day of relationship here, and I can't even remember what the details I've gotten lost over, I realize that's the flesh. That's not God's mind. Because God's mind is I could agree quickly, and I could say, I'm sorry, I apologize for my part in this, and I'm wrong. And then it gets solved, and we're on to the next relationship, And I think that at the end of the day, when we know that we're imperfect people and we are a bunch of sinners huddled around the cross, which is really me dying to myself, everybody dying to them. So let's all find out, what is God's mind for us? What's God's position on this? How do we stand? Let's find out what the will of God is. We've heard Pastor Stephen's definition of success years ago was finding out what the will of God is and doing it.
Yeah, that's great. Because we've all heard this the statement, opposites attract, and I mean, there's some truth in that.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I mean, I'm if I had my druthers, I would say, hey, let's go to the health club.
Yeah.
And we'll get a good workout in, 3 times a week or whenever. My wife is like, no, we just need to take a walk.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's going to be accomplished by walking?
Yeah.
We're going to be together. That's all she's saying is we need to be together.
Yeah.
Because if we go to the health club, we might not be together.
Right.
You may be over in one part of it, and I may be over in the other part of it. So it's true that opposites do attract. I mean, I would say that my wife and I we are opposites. But the second part of that statement is similarities endure. What are the similarities that allow us to endure? It's our love for God.
Yes.
Our understanding of His commitment to us. The grace that keeps us going. It's the oil of the engine of our marriage. It's forgiving one another when failure happens. These are the things that cause us to endure. This is how we continue. This is how marriages endure over the long haul.
Yeah, and it's really very similar to how my relationship with God endures over the long haul.
Exactly.
If I see myself in my last failure, or even if I see myself in my last success, I might miss the present thing that God has for me. If I'm walking around in an identity because of something that happened instead of an identity of who I am, then I'm going to have trouble. And in a relationship, boy, we have a great marriage. She gave me a great meal yesterday, and the relationship at home was good, and whatever it is, people find their identity in their sex lives. They find their identity in what their spouse says publicly about them, or what their home is like, and all of those things really are way secondary to do I have the love of God in my marriage? And can we endure things that are going to be trials and tribulations and troubles? And there are times of weeping together. There's also lots of rejoicing and laughing. And nobody has a relationship with their spouse like, with other people with their spouse, I hope, because you're sharing intimate thoughts and details and you're laughing about things that, only you find funny. My wife is married to a guy who's the perpetual dad joke, and whether I like it or not, sometimes it happens in the middle of the night when I wake up to use the restroom. She says, "Where are you going?" And I come out with some stupid joke that I don't even know how came into my brain that way. But she's learned to appreciate that you're an odd bird, but you're my odd bird, and it's fitting. My last name is Quirk. So, but we have, there's a lot of joy that happens, and really, the Bible tells us in John 15:13 that greater love has no man than he lays down his life for his friends. And I think the friendship that happens in a relationship happens because we learn that we endure hardships and troubles, and that anyone who thinks that the marriage is going to be rosy the whole time is in for a big surprise. And that's really, when you're talking about your grandson getting married, you'd like to give him a healthy dose of reality is, hey, when the rubber hits the road and you have trials and tribulations, you have somebody who is prepared a way for you. You have a way to go through those trials. Cast your cares together at the feet of God. If you can't agree on everything, that's okay. Prefer one another. Watch God show you what's important. And I really do like the thought that sometimes in our hearts, we're moved to do things that we know will bless our spouse. And that comes from experiencing God's life. It comes from learning who the person is. And, we can get a lot of benefit out of that. There's a lot of joy that comes with esteeming one another higher than ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, these are some good thoughts. Pastor Barry, maybe we can talk about some of those principles that will help to continue to build the marriage relationship. Because, again, I think anybody that enters into a marriage relationship is thinking, certainly at the outset, that they want this to last.
Yeah.
But again, there are going to be difficulties and challenges and heartache and trouble. I mean, on and on. But as someone once said that, Christians, especially Christians, we're like tea bags. You don't get the best out of us until you put us in hot water. And that's true even in a marriage, even in a marriage. So those challenges, those difficulties serve to develop our relationship with Christ. And again, as long as you're cooperating in the developing of your relationship with Christ, that's going to benefit your relationship to your spouse, and it's going to develop your relationship to other people as well.
Yeah, try resisting. Try resisting, being brought through those difficulties or those times and trying to preserve something, and you end up with death. You don't have the life that's actually brought out of you. I read this article that I think there's some points we could share that speak to these points, and it's by a Focus on the Family article, and it talks from a study that Dr. John Gottman, who is a professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Washington, and he's the founder of the Gottman Relationship Institute, which that's an interesting thing, that there's enough in a relationship that you can have an entire institute and you could be a professor and study these things. And it's really actually kind of fascinating. And this article is gauging how you can tell the health of your marriage. And he gave 6 predictors of marital success and happiness. And I thought a couple of these are really good. But like high levels of friendship, respect, affection, humor, right? Learning to laugh at ourselves. And these are things that are just defined like liking each other. Imagine that, liking each other. And we've heard that expression. We don't really have to like each other, but we got to love each other, right? There's things that maybe in the beginning that we really enjoyed, but as we grow, they become, if you let them they'll become an irritant to you instead of something that maybe in the beginning, that little giggle or that laugh or, whatever it is that now drives you crazy instead of in the beginning drew your attention. When we love somebody, we start to realize that is something that's very unique to that person in my life, and I don't get that anyplace else. Maybe my perspective changes on it. Other things like, being each other's friend, just doing things together, as you mentioned earlier, respecting each other's thoughts and feelings, also avoiding put downs. It's so easy to, when we are together, especially because you're together so often, to get to learn each other's weaknesses, right? And I will tell you, one thing I have to confess is that I'm a master at learning all the buttons to push. And part of it is that I like to have fun and I like to just provoke. And that can be very enjoyable or can be very detrimental depending on which buttons I push. But it is in my sin nature to know how to push the wrong buttons. And sometimes I push that wrong button and I get a response that's nuclear. And I realize that's not her fault. That's my fault. I engaged, I provoked, I pushed. And also, I am a strong arguer. So I could maybe have a winning battle record. I could win every battle that we face because I can argue. But at the end of the day, I've lost the war of my relationship because all I did was cause her to submit to my argument of skills when she's not even interested in arguing in the beginning. The greatest defense that she has is to say, "Oh, really? Okay, good night," and roll over and go to sleep. And we can't go to sleep. We got to talk about this. And it's like, no, I'm not interested, and I haven't won anything, So I just think like some of these things are really awesome. And he even goes as far as to give a ratio of positive to negative interactions. And I know some of these are anecdotal and it's just, there's nothing in the Bible that says these numbers, but you can kind of draw some encouragement from it and maybe even some motivation on how we approach our relationship. But there's this 5-to-1 of better to positive versus negative interactions. And if we even had that in our mind, like do my relationships with my wife or whoever, my spouse, if you're a lady out there listening this morning, do my relationships intentionally try to promote experiences that are positive instead of nitpicking, instead of, getting on somebody's case, getting on somebody's nerves? Maybe if I recognize that there's a weakness in my spouse, I go out of my way to do something that helps strengthen that. It's always incredible to me how much, my wife has something on her mind that helps my ministry or helps my everyday life that I'm not good at, but she is. And she just blesses me, and I walk out of there being thankful for that. And that's like a huge thing. So, and then just like, how about this one? And this, maybe we can go on to something else, but successful bids for attention. And this was kind of comical because my wife says, "Hey, listen to this." She's trying to get your attention for a conversation, right? And we could have a couple different responses to that. We could keep our head in the newspaper and, read our sports page and ignore that. And we have not given her the opportunity to get our attention. But better is to lift your head up and go, what's that, honey? Right? I've acknowledged that I'm interested in having communication, but better yet is imagine if I actually listen and respond in kind to what she's saying, not an answer that only reveals that I'm trying to placate her, but I actually have interest in what she said and I answer it accordingly. And maybe there's that bid for attention, that question, that silliness is just saying, hey, there's a little bit lack going on in my life, and I would appreciate if you have something to give me input in. And maybe God gives you a word in season. Maybe there's a challenge or a trouble. It's happened to me the other way around, where I'm, caught up in the busyness of our lives. We both face relationships with young people. There's parental decisions. There's kids that are making decisions, and there's a lot of weight on those decisions sometimes. And we're thinking about these things a lot, and we can take them home with us sometimes.
Sure.
And, maybe something that my wife says has the ability to help relieve some of that pressure or to put me back into the perspective of, hey, you got to refresh and you got to be in the Lord and just be built up. Sometimes you got to take a pause for the cause, and those are things that are very helpful. So I found that article to be interesting. Disagreements. How about a soft start to a disagreement instead of jumping into, you're such an idiot. That's not going to get you anywhere. But you say, hey, I'm a little bit troubled by something. Maybe you can help me with it. Then it's a discussion and it's not an accusation.
Yeah.
right? Maybe the discussion leads you to go, oh, I am misunderstanding something, or there's a piece in this that I didn't see was a weakness in my own life. These are things that when we talk about Genesis and being a helpmeet, like God didn't give, some people we get a little bit offended by that. What do you mean a helpmeet? You know, was it saying I'm subservient to the man? And actually, God saying that I created a helpmeet for you showed that there's an inadequacy in a man that only can be filled by the helpmeet, right? Yeah. So actually, it's quite the contrary. It's not that there's some inferiority. It's like you have something that you bring to this equation that can only be filled by you. And there's a lot we could say about that, but that's how God complements us with one another. Instead of being threatened by that or to look at that as you're inferior, how about I can't live without that? You know, I need that in my life. I need that in my relationship. And I think good leaders in life realize it's not about solo leadership initiating to people and them responding so that you get the benefit, but it's about great teams and great responsibilities and relationships that end up in fruit because you're submitted to one another in love, and it's all submitted to the plan of God.
And all of those principles that you just shared, and I felt like it was a personal counseling session for me. But all of those principles involve effort. It involves initiation.
Yes.
Let's call it what it is. It's hard work.
It is.
And again, I don't think that there is anything that's more challenging in a person's life than maintaining that marriage relationship.
Yeah.
So you got to know. It would be helpful to know when you're going into it that this is going to require, effort and maintenance from day one until the day that God takes us home.
Yeah.
And that's just a very practical way to look at it. But to approach it without a relationship with Christ, without seeking the kingdom of God first.
Yes.
I don't know. It's almost in a world. Let me give you an illustration. Years ago they said on the cover of a Cosmopolitan magazine, there was how to prepare for the greatest wedding of your life. And then on the same cover, a little bit further down on the front page, it said, how to have an affair without him knowing about it.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, that's the world's perspective about relationships and marriage. We have to, we cannot afford to walk in the counsel of the ungodly.
Right.
We have the Bible. We've got the promises of God. If you have a local church, you've got a great advantage to helping you in your marriage and in your marriage relationship. If there are troubles in the marriage relationship, seek out counsel, wise counsel, godly counsel, and get wisdom from above so that you can find some help. And you just want a marriage that endures, because as you age and you get older, two are always better than one.
No doubt. And we like that advice that you just read, or just mentioned. There's two completely different kingdoms there, right? How to prepare for a perfect marriage, and then once you're in that perfect marriage, how to prepare cheats that allow you to have satisfaction that you're not getting from that perfect marriage. And we know much better than that. We know that there is satisfaction that comes in a good marriage, and it's not just because you're providing something for her or she's providing something for you. It's that your satisfaction is not coming from the other person. It's coming from God, who you realize put me in this institution of marriage. By his grace, he thought it best for us to have a union that would benefit not just our personal desires. I mean, there's a lot of personal fruit from that, obviously, but how about for the sake of the body of Christ, or for other people, or, people watch even the troubles that we go through or the challenges that we go through. And you could say, okay, 40-something years of marriage, and it hasn't been perfect. We've had our moments, we've had our trials. And other people go, yeah, and you're still together. That's incredible, because as you just mentioned, marriages are disposable in the world.
Yes.
If you're not happy married today, go find somebody who you can cheat with.
Yeah, paper plate marriages.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but we say you're going to have failures in your life, but when you have them, just like you do in your personal walk with God, you renew your relationship with God. You wake up in the morning and you offer him the sacrifice of praise. Before your feet are hitting the ground, in our hearts and in our, we're already on our knees saying, Lord, I need you today. I'm wrong. Would you restore my relationship with you? He's faithful and just to forgive us, to cleanse us from all our unrighteousness, and to give us a great place of standing. So if we can keep our relationships like that, short accounts, fresh, understanding that, it's the grace of God that we're even in the relationship still, that my wife hasn't killed me yet is an amazing thing. There's a lot of television shows out there today that
oh my gosh,
show wives how to kill their husbands and not be noticed.
Gosh, yeah.
And
all of the trials that we hear about on these TV shows are all about spouses taking each other's lives.
Yeah. And you always ask your question, why don't you just walk away? Like if you're really that unhappy, why don't you just walk away instead of destroying everybody else's life around you? And the power that God gives us in relationships. And this is one of those topics where we're talking about experience and we are sharing thoughts from the Bible, but God gives us a mind to think with Him in it. And I think that the way that what we bring to the plate in our marriage is maturity that comes from God. And this is why we ask young people to wait. Like, it seems like such an awesome, encouraging, exciting thing. Let's get married. Let's get married. It takes a lot of maturity.
Sure.
And actually, what are you bringing to the table in that marriage? Are you bringing your insecurities that you're looking to have fulfilled? Because if you are, it might happen for a short season, but then there's going to be a lot of lack, and you're going to be looking elsewhere for the same thing, the same lack. It's deficit motivation, actually. That you're lacking something, so you're looking for it, and you jump from situation to situation, and even in your marriage, from the person that you can't get that satisfaction from. It's like that old rock and roll song, I can't get no satisfaction. Well, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Because if your satisfaction doesn't come from your relationship with God,
exactly,
then where is it going to come from? If your satisfaction's in a person, it's going to be very temporal, and it's going to fail. And how are we going to be able to walk together in agreement if we're living in the failure of a bad relationship?
Yeah. You hear young people say it all the time, I need to find the right person. I need to find the right person. It's almost as if when they're younger, you want to say to them, well, why don't you focus more on being the right person? Let God develop your soul.
Yes.
So that when He brings the right person into your life, you'll recognize who that is, and you'll be prepared for the marriage relationship.
Beautiful. And I think as we're young and we're looking for a relationship in people, we oftentimes think of, what do I have to do to make this work, or how, chasing this person, or I got to find this relationship. And God just says, be still and know that I'm God. Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I'm God, and have a relationship with me. And I'll actually give you something that stability of a relationship that learns how to wait on God. It's very attractive to somebody who's looking to place their trust in their spouse for the rest of their lives. They want to know that you're a person that's not moved by situations. Yeah. They want to know that you're a person that experiences the love of God personally. Like, I know that I'm the biggest sinner out there. So therefore, I have to, in order to have a happiness in my life, I got to receive God's mercy and forgiveness and love. And if I can receive it, then it's easy for me to issue it, because I realize in my own life, it's only the grace of God. I'm not consumed.
Now, when you said you were the biggest sinner in life, I did say I agreed with you. But what I meant was for myself, because we can debate over that.
No, I think we all could. We all, nobody lives inside of us like we do.
Yeah. Well, if you don't, one brother said that if you don't see yourself as the greatest sinner that's ever lived, you really don't know yourself.
Yeah.
And that's some truth in that. A lot of truth in that.
But thankfully, when I wake up this morning and I came into the plaza and we knew we were going to do the show, you didn't think to yourself, boy, I hope Quirk's got his life together, because I can't be in that room with him. Because we know our own relationships are not based on, our personal. I mean, obviously we want right standing with God, but that's the most important thing. It's like do I have a walk with God, and does it guide who I am in my relationships? And I would say absolutely. And we can be wrong. Yeah. But the beautiful thing is you can say, I'm sorry.
Amen.
Powerful words. Like, we'll leave you with those powerful words for your marriage today. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm still learning it. 31 years,
Learn to say it over and over again.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry. I'm wrong. It's my fault.
Yeah.
Pick any one of those three you like.
Yeah. And actually believe it, because it's true. You really have made mistakes. The old adage that, I'm never wrong. I thought I was once, but I was mistaken. Well, welcome to the big pride fall that's going to happen after a short season. So
Amen.
I'm wrong. God is right. I want to be aligned with God, and I want to bring that to my relationship, and you'll find yourself having a good one.
Yeah. Two are better than one, and a threefold cord is not easily broken.
Amen.
And that's the relationship that we have with God. Thanks so much, friends. We're out of time, but you can tune in to the special July 4th edition of the Grace Hour that we've prepared for you. That's coming up tomorrow. And we hope you have a great holiday. And thanks so much for joining us. And stay tuned for the next Grace Hour broadcast coming your way. Until then, may God bless you.